iHeart radio station.
Coming into the Bradshaw and Bryant KFN text line 646-86. We are, well, essentially, it's a Talker Tuesday on a Tuesday, the rest of the show. Because for the moment, we have no more guests scheduled. I have texts out to a lot of people that I'm hoping to become part of the festivities, perhaps as soon as today, perhaps another day, but thus far, nothing happening in that regard. We'll keep you posted. But Louie will be with us tomorrow. What else do we have this week right now? I feel like we've got something else. We'll get the inbox Thursday.
Yep, I got to text Gleeman. I'm hoping Gleeman can come back on Thursday. He'll have a different Emilio Pagan discussion, probably. Although we had him on last week because it was the day after the most recent Pagan blow-up.
Oh, that's right. It was, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Very, very true, Davey. I got to ask him, remind me to ask Gleeman about a new analytics stat that he's probably quite familiar with. I'd never heard of before. And it left me dizzy. I mean, I at the end of it, I wasn't, well, is this a good stat or a bad stat? Whatever. I'm not exactly sure, but we'll try to run that by him. We were talking late in the conversation with LaTroy about what happened to the, now former voice of the Oakland A's. I think Kuiper was his name. Is that the name of the... I'll find it in a minute here. I just had it, but of course the internet, it's in a minute for me to reset. Glenn Kuiper, fired after using a racial slur on the air. And we've been down this road before, but I'll bite. Texter guy Steve writes, is it the same vile term or name I hear 30 times every day at the Lifetime or every time I turn on a Netflix comedy special, or on and on? A lot more people should lose their jobs, I guess. Perhaps almost every NBA player, all silly fools. We can have and have tried to have over the years intelligent conversations about, are there double standards? What are the lines? Because when it comes to using the N-word, there are many older African Americans we've had on this show from time to time who believe literally, I think Sam Mitchell's in this category, who just can't stand the term enough to say, I'm never excusing it, no matter what, in music or whatever the case may be. But I would say to Steve, what you're suggesting here makes no sense if you watch the video and the context in which he is saying what he's saying. That it's your point, I don't think has any, for me, it's not very convincing. Like I said, we can have the larger discussion, but in terms of this particular context and what he was saying and what he was attempting to say, I don't think this is one where you just have to shake your head and say, boy, we kind of make it up as we go along when it comes to the use of that word, the situation in which he's using it, what he's really referring to, et cetera, et cetera. Now we can debate whether the job should be lost. I guess we can go down the road of, well, Dave Stewart says, leave him alone. I know he's not a racist in his heart. Whatever the exact quote was, I don't know. We can have that discussion, but I don't think this is. I don't think this is at all an example where you go, well, it's thrown out there flippantly all the time when there was nothing flippant about this. And in fact, there was nothing even in the immediate aftermath that would even indicate that that Kuiper seemed to even understand what he had just said.
Didn't seem like it.
That part of it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But if you want to go down that road, I guess you can. Ed writes, it'd be nice to have Ryan Saunders on the program to talk about how he and the Nuggets run and going to the NBA Finals. Speak of the devil, that's another person I texted. Now, Ryan Saunders is very serious about his job.
Yes.
So he's one of those guys, we have texted back and forth on a few things, but so part of my impetus for texting him this time was they got a lot of time off. Now, whether the team has a lot of time off, I don't know. My guess is even the team will probably have a day or two off.
Yeah.
Given they're not going to play for 9 days.
Thursday, June 1st is the first game of the finals.
Okay, so that's 9 days, right? I mean, that's a lengthy amount of time, and so there's a good chance he might even be able to get away. I'm hoping we get a chance to. I'd love to talk to him about it, about Joker, etc. But we'll see how that goes. National Football League has decided to steal from your college game in the, I guess, now ongoing effort to eliminate what once upon a time was one of the most exciting plays of football from football. Kickoff returners will now be able to do exactly what college returners can do. Catch the ball at the 3-yard line, take a knee, and their team will be able to start from the 25-yard line. Now, I think this is a 1-year deal. We're going to see. I guess they're going to see how it goes. The word on the street is part of the impetus behind this decision is the number of those, what they call pop-up kickoffs, that was kind of being used as a strategy that I think made some sense. Generally speaking, we're just going to kick the ball as deep as we can, touchback, start at the 20 or 25, wherever we start. And so occasionally there were some smart, crafty special teams guys that basically said, hey, let's not try to kick it 20 yards beyond the end zone. Let's do a high pop-up. Catch them with their pants around their ankles. They won't know what hit them. And according to what I've read, there's indication that research shows some injuries have resulted from the rising number of pop-up kickoffs. I don't know how accurate that information is, but the bottom line is, we're going to, how many years ago did the college game go to this rule?
Oh, 4 or 5 probably. Maybe less than that. And depending on the team, you see, like the Gophers almost exclusively
for a long catch it. Yeah,
and
I noticed
just take it to the 25, which drives some people crazy because what's going to be interesting is all of a sudden it looks like the returner has 20 yards in front of him because somebody did a pop-up kick, but because it was predetermined that they were going to catch everything, you're going to catch it. It's almost like now when you do it with the punt, right? You see guys do a fair catch and then they look and they go, I could have run. I could have done that. Like it opens up like a whole nother second guess. I've been in a lot of games where it's like, why aren't they doing anything?
Yeah, I have tended to agree with them in the college game that it's like, oh, come on, don't, because for me it comes off as we don't know how to establish a legitimate return game. And we're so frustrated by it, we're just conceding. And now we have an excuse to concede because just take the damn knee. I don't like the message it sends either. On the other hand, when it comes to the pro game at this, and by the way, in college you could also say, as you mentioned, maybe you're down a couple of scores and here's a chance to get some good field position. But in the pro game, I guess I didn't think there were that many pop-up kickoffs. Did you? I mean, to the point where
I was saying they just kick it through the end zone.
Yeah, why even bother? Don't even kick the damn thing off at all. Somebody who had the stat here, just to show you how things have changed. This past season, this is actually more than I would have thought. 37.5% of kickoffs were brought back.
That seemed high to me too when I saw that today.
Yet, if you go back 20 years before, it was over 90% that were returned. So it's obviously going in that direction. The league's modeling projects that it will fall to 31% this year because of the new rule. Because I would assume it does effectively eliminate the pop-up, right? Unless you go with the they don't have anybody near there, and he's going backwards trying to catch it, and he just fumbles it. He muffs the kick. Then you got something, but I'm assuming that this will make it even less likely that most teams will even, will want to mess around at all with the pop-up if the return guy can just take and, grab the ball and go down at the 8-yard line, wherever it is.
And I got to read the rule if they're taking exactly what the college game does, because the one thing to watch for when you do the fair catch wherever you are, and a lot of times it's the 10 or 15, whatever it is.
Yes.
But if you drop it, the ball's just dead right there. Like, you have to catch it in the college game. You can't muff it. It's not like...
Well, but you can't, and same in the NFL, though. I think you can't muff it as well.
That's that's what I was asking.
Yes, I'm pretty sure.
Because that's the only drama that it adds to it.
It does.
It's good, but you better catch it.
You got to catch it.
And the college guys aren't pros.
No, they're not.
I mean, it doesn't happen a lot, but every once in a while it happens.
And if you place it the right place where somebody's got to be running to get it, then that could still potentially be a weapon. A couple more texts are coming in, and we'll get to a couple of other NFL/Vikings.
On the Fan.
Thursday, June, to get ready for the first ever iHeartRadio Access Day, where we give you access like never before. The biggest deals from national and local brands you love, along with a chance at Vikings and Wild experiences. Register now to get reminders when experiences go live Thursday, June 1st. Go to iHeartRadioAccessDay.com, iHeartRadioAccessDay.com.
This is that whole banality of evil mindset that the lexicon of individuals of an ethnic group, race, religion can look inward and utilize terminology that is part of their respective experience. The cluelessness of those that decide they're racist or misogynistic or anti-Semitic are allowed because the language is used even flippantly, then allows the demeaning and dehumanizing of a group that's just unacceptable. Social media has allowed this behavior to be far more acceptable as you can connect with like-minded individuals who make it seem okay. I'll just give you the Barreiro rule because that's all I can speak to. I don't like it ever being used by anybody of any race, but the non-negotiable part of it for me as a white person is a white person should never even get near it. And again, we can have the debate about whether minorities should use it, whatever the case may be. There's the old story about, well, in some cases, some blacks have said we use it to gain control of it and to actually then cheapen the hatred of it, that's in it. And again, you could do PhD term papers on the multi-layers related to that. I'm firmly in the belief that it's thrown around too much across the board, but I think for reasons that should be self-evident, there's a line that especially pertains to white folks, I would say. Now, another tweeter mentioned the John Folke story. The former Hornets announcer tweeted the N-word. And we talked about that at the time. My gut, to me that feels different than uttering the word as directly. You have to sort of see the video, as Kuiper did, the A's announcer, as matter-of-factly as he did. I have ultimately no problems with. In fact, I think it was probably the only decision that the team could make, or in this case, I think it was Comcast, whatever the outlet was, NBC Sports.
Yeah, the NBC
to do
outlet.
what they did. Now, we mentioned with LaTroy Hawkins, AP quoted some unidentified sources as saying there were some other things involved. That can be a little dangerous because, what are they? But to me, that was, I think, the end there was inevitable in that case. I don't think it should have been as inevitable in the Folke case. Now, what I don't know is whether they did their own investigating and found something else out. Because a texter guy, is this true? Says, I'm sure you're aware your phone is able to recognize and will intuitively predict text and words the more the more often they are used. So his implication there is that
he was using it all the time.
He was using it all the time.
Which we talked about at the time.
Right.
I don't even think that word. I don't think that word is allowed.
Exactly.
I get so sick when I hear that because it was the easy. Because you know what I think about the Foki situation. I thought he got absolutely screwed.
Yes.
And we talked about that endlessly at the time. People kept bringing that up. Nope, the phone, it autocorrects.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. Not for that word. And
for a very specific reason.
Yes.
Exactly.
And that's what still to this day bugs me about that whole thing.
So for me, and I don't know if you've seen the Kuiper.
I watched the video, yeah.
To me, these are two completely different situations. Wherever you go with Kuiper, I don't, unless there's, like I say, a component in the Foki story, I think this was a classic case of a team that didn't have the guts to stand up and to say, this is not, that we have literally no indication that this is who he is or what he's done or whatever the case may be, and we'll take the hit if there's going to be pushback for a while. They didn't want to mess with it, and so they did not. Has he even have been allowed to surface, Foki?
I mean, not in a public sense like that.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of another job?
Nope.
Oh, I see it. To me, that's sad. But that's an example of Pitchfork Nation, I think, out of control. The Kuiper audio was, I don't know how to describe it. It was so, he said it so matter-of-factly that it terrified me and said, who are you? What are you doing? So, to each their own. Everybody can come to different conclusions. Now, a texter also said, oh, wait a minute. Now I'm all confused. So Kuiper is gone, and yet we've got a certain college basketball coach at West Virginia.
Bob
Huggins, who offers, it's a different slur, but definitely a slur, and he gets, $1 million taken off his salary?
He's going to miss 3 games.
Miss 3 games against hyphenated opponents.
That was a joke.
In November, which was an utter ridiculous. So, yeah, I can't defend it. I think there is great inconsistency there. But let's be honest about this. It shouldn't matter, but part of what is, I guess you could say, leading the West Virginia people to sort of have more grace than the NBC Sports Bay Area outfit is with Kuiper is one guy's a baseball announcer and the other guy helps them win basketball games and went to West Virginia, right? And he's kind of a legend in West Virginia.
Yep.
Things that shouldn't have anything to do with it, but in a real world sense, tend to. Because I don't. We're both on record on that one. That, in fact, when I was first told even before the punishment came down and I was asked by a couple people, can he survive this? Once I heard it, I said, no, it's over. That's done. There's no, because once again, he said it as matter-of-factly as Kuiper did.
A couple of times, I think.
And that end was very unsatisfactory. It was ridiculous. It is ridiculous that Huggins is able, in my view, to keep his position. So, what was the song that was played out of the 4 o'clock break? Do you remember?
The 4 o'clock break?
He texted, at 4:05.
I feel like that was Todd Rundgren, Fidelity.
Oh, Fidelity. Good Todd Rundgren. Good underrated Todd Rundgren
I just
song.
pulled it up. Todd
Rundgren's by the way,
Fidelity.
Todd Rundgren's got a son who is a very good baseball player?
I did not know that.
Which Todd Rundgren said makes no sense. He said he's never been into sports, not particularly coordinated. His kids, I think, I don't know if he's still a baseball prospect. For a while, he was a baseball prospect. Think about it.
Kids are going to be what kids are going to be.
What else are we looking for? Freudian slip. Look it up, genius. Why don't you just do us a favor? Love having you text, but just say what you mean. Tell me exactly what you're trying to say. You're not impressing me with the discovery of the term Freudian slip. You've not discovered electricity. with that. Yeah, and it was I think it was his NBC decision, not the team. What input the team might have had, I don't know. And how much more there is to the story, I don't know.
FAN, the Fan.
At KFAN.com, make the keyword contest. You can enter to win a family-sized pepperoni pizza, cookie dough, classic cheesy bread, and a 2-liter soft drink, all thanks to Papa Murphy's. KFAN.com, keyword contest.
I've got 2 different A-section subjects I want to discuss the next few days. They're both quite light. One of them is crime, which we've discussed intermittently forever. And the other is the child gender culture war. That's an easy one to wade into.
Oh, that should be fine, yeah.
Yeah, so let's just dive in. Let's dive in to the latter today and see how that goes. I'm going to use as my starting point today on this very combustible, polarizing subject, in which apparently there is no such thing as a middle, by quoting from a piece out of The Atlantic. The writer's name is Helen Lewis. And she wrote a piece, this is from earlier this month. Headline, The Only Way Out of the Child Gender Culture War. The U.S. is becoming an outlier. Punitive bans won't help. Better evidence will. And to that point, in fact, there was, I think, a Wall Street Journal story today that I read online indicating that now 16 states have placed broad new restrictions on gender-affirming health care for transgender minors this year. 16 others having introduced similar bills. These bills, which have been introduced mostly in Republican-controlled states, limit one or both of the main forms of gender-affirming care, medications that can delay the onset of puberty or hormones, and surgeries that aid in gender transition. So it's timely. It's ongoing right now. And I thought this piece set it out kind of nicely, although I'm sure she's getting savaged for certain aspects of it. And she notes that in this country, the debate is split along, shockingly, sharks and jets lines. Left-leaning activist groups in the White House regularly describe child transition as life-saving and raise the specter of suicide if care is withdrawn. Meanwhile, Texas Governor Greg Abbott and former President Donald Trump have called medical transition child abuse. If the most extreme red state bills go ahead, both parents and doctors could face prosecution for giving a child access to treatment. Now, this writer believes that these bans on child transition are unhelpful, illiberal, and in many cases disturbingly punitive. But she adds that they say that as someone with serious reservations about the most influential model of child gender care in America. She's here to ask some questions, even if she is offended by just how aggressive many of these laws are becoming, have already become, and are continuing to become in many, many states in the United States of America, Minnesota obviously not included. She notes that that from the statements of leading practitioners, we do know that many have rejected a model that's called watchful waiting, where extensive talk therapy is preferred to puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgery, at least seen as a prerequisite for those medical interventions. Instead, they favor something called affirmative care, grounded in the belief that kids know who they are, even though a 2016 review of the available studies estimated that without medical interventions, gender dysphoria in children resolves itself during or after puberty in about 80% of cases. She parenthetically adds, supporters of medical treatment dispute the validity and relevance of that particular research. That's where it gets, we say follow the science, that's where it gets funky. 7 of the 18 U.S. clinics surveyed in the Reuters investigation said they were comfortable prescribing hormones to minors on their first visit. Providers and their behavior haven't been closely studied, wrote a pair of experienced clinicians in the field. This was in a Washington Post story in 2021, but we find evidence every single day from our peers across the country and concerned parents who reach out that the field has moved from a more nuanced and individualized and developmentally appropriate assessment process to one where every problem looks like a medical one that can be solved quickly with medication or ultimately surgery. She notes that the reason many American lefties give for supporting gender-affirming care is they believe the science is settled. She quotes Rachel Levine, the Assistant Secretary for Health in the Department of Health and Human Services, has claimed there is no argument among medical professionals about the value and importance of gender-affirming care. End quote. Lewis writes, the truth of that statement depends in part on the definition of gender-affirming care. The statement by Levine, who is herself trans, could be interpreted as suggesting specifically that hormonal and surgical interventions, perhaps even for younger minors, are uncontroversial among clinicians and indisputably backed by sound science. She writes, they are not. She notes that because of all the red state bills, some medical groups have stepped in, a number of big shot groups saying basically there's nothing to see here, that there's no need for these bills. And in fact, they are in of themselves quite dangerous. Quite understandably, writes the author of this piece, those on the American left who pride themselves on following the science on vaccines and climate change take their cues from these powerful institutions on this polarized topic, too. Yet, as one editor recently said with scientific understatement, the strength of American clinical recommendations is not in line with the strength of the evidence. To skeptics, the American medical guidelines appear less evidence-based than consensus-based. They're saying that medical associations, under political pressure from activists, have succumbed to well-intentioned groupthink as well. And she notes, for example, several European countries that once tacked towards affirmative care, which is, the trend here, have recently looked at the evidence and revised their treatment protocols. Sweden's new guidelines, which were developed alongside a formal review by that country's National Board of Health and Welfare, state that the risks of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, quote, currently outweigh the possible benefits, end quote, and they should be given only in exceptional cases or research settings. Health authorities in England and Finland have proposed new guidelines that would restrict the use of puberty blockers. Norway's healthcare watchdog states basically that the knowledge base, especially research-based research-based knowledge for gender-affirming treatment, hormonal and surgical, is insufficient, and the long-term effects are little known. National Academy of Medicine in France now states that because of the possibility that a social contagion is driving up case counts, doctors should prescribe hormones with the greatest reserve. Minors should also be informed about the irreversible nature of treatment, possibility of impact on growth, bone fragility, and a number of other lists as well. Now, she also acknowledges, does the writer of this piece in The Atlantic, Helen Lewis, that there are a number of other developed countries, including Spain, Italy, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, that still, like the U.S., recommend puberty blockers. But even some of these, apparently, are expressing more caution. A leading practitioner in Canada at Toronto St. Michael Hospital calls for the country's doctors to slow it down just a bit. There are a couple of others who've said pretty much the same thing. Across the world, doctors are expressing caution over side effects, acknowledging the experimental nature of medical interventions, and entertaining the possibility that the recent surge in teenage trans identification is socially driven rather than solely evidence of previous underdiagnosis. She notes, I should say, and part of her point is that much of Europe is now on a different path from the U.S. And she notes that either those countries, including some of the most progressive and LGBTQ-friendly nations on earth, are secretly as right-wing as Governor Abbott of Florida and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, or they know something that America doesn't. Now, she also says it can't be right to prosecute loving parents for seeking care for their children that has been recommended to them by their doctors. Just as we lack proof that current treatments are categorically life-saving, we do not have evidence that they constitute, quote-unquote, child abuse, and that those bans become harmful because of the possibility of unintended consequences as well. When red states ban child transition, many on the left instinctively jump to defend medical interventions. This tendency is then intensified when youth gender bills come packaged alongside overtly anti-LGBTQ legislation, as in Florida a couple of weeks ago. Yet, child transition should be treated differently from debates over drag queen story hour, and differently from adult transition, too, where the case for relying purely on informed consent is much more compelling. And I'll jump forward a little bit here to kind of the conclusion that she gets to. A proper systematic review of child transition care by the American medical establishment might well uncover the same blurry picture now agreed upon by doctors in England, France, Norway, Sweden, and Finland. And at that point, then clinical guidelines would have to change as a result. Perhaps stressing the importance of assessment and therapy, and clinics would have to get better at collecting long-term follow-up data. In the meantime, the U.S., in her mind, should take after Europe, requiring medical assessment and counseling before prescribing puberty blockers or hormones to minors would be neither illiberal nor punitive, and insisting that patient outcomes be tracked over several years will give us better data on what works. And here's what we in the newspaper business call the nut graph. It's at the end, but it's the nut graph. That would allow or would offer a middle ground between the total bans of the red states and an unregulated, activist-driven regime under which, at some clinics, a minor can obtain testosterone at a first appointment. A more reasoned approach would represent a triumph over partisans on both sides, and most important of all, do right by the thousands of children seeking care every year. Remarkable, I think, in the nuance that's offered in this particular piece. My guess is she's getting killed. In this case, more by people, hardcores on the left, but in other places in this piece, some on the right, which as far as I'm concerned would mean she's doing her job. She's raising what should be reasonable questions and reasonable points that if we're being honest, are discussions that are taking place from time to time at every kitchen table in America. And they're not, the people having those conversations aren't evil. They're not anti-trans. They're asking sensible questions. You don't even have to think you know the answer. But again, sadly, as she points out in this piece, as we've talked about before, when the game becomes, I can't concede any of these points because if I do, I give sustenance to the transphobes, we get nowhere. Then people become terrified of asking some of the questions that she is asking in this particular piece, which I, again, found quite reasonable on a number of fronts about how dangerous the extremes can be. I honestly believe that, look, there's obviously transphobic folks out there. We know that. I honestly believe, I like to think for most reasonable citizens of this country, that the dividing line is children and adults. That's the dividing line. And that we should be able, when it comes to children, to ask these questions without it turning into, what are you saying? Where are you coming from? Why do you hate these children? Why do you want to ruin the lives of thousands of children out there? And I appreciate when a writer in this case attempts, I think, to sort of say, well, no, let's talk about this. Let's also factor in let's not go with the assumption that because activists say the science is settled, and even some doctors say the science is settled, that it is settled. And she points out, I think quite rightly, that in some locations, some countries, there is a revisiting of earlier positions. Now, guess what? They might be revisited again if we get more research that is viewed as objective. Maybe it will answer some of those questions, right? Maybe it will make it easier to understand exactly what the age should be, what the line should be. But the notion that there's something transphobic about suggesting, what's the process here? How about counseling? How about some evaluation of an individual patient? That shouldn't be out of bounds. It shouldn't mean you're transphobic. They're out there. We know that. But I just thought she raised a lot of really good points. And I wish I think we've quoted, there have been a couple of, New York Times had a couple of similar pieces. I don't know if we talked about it at the time. There was one in particular, and the reporters of it got barbecued. They got skewered as you're giving in to the hardcore righties. And that's always what we end up. That's why we never really get anywhere, is in an honest effort to examine a complicated issue. If any questions are raised, you're giving sustenance to the bad guys. Therefore, you should shut up about it and not even go down that particular road. But I do believe that more reporters, writers, and even doctors are becoming a little braver about asking questions and saying, hold up here. Are we as certain as we want to say we are? Because there's a hell of a lot at stake here. This isn't like the question of the stupid drag queen controversy. You know what I'm saying? These are children. There's a lot more riding on this particular issue. And I appreciated her trying to take, I believe, a very even-handed approach, but remind some of the professionals, if her information is accurate, and I have no reason to think that it's not, that we should be able to have a discussion about this before it immediately becoming a name-calling exhibition that is an attempt, let's be honest again, to just shut down any discussion. Just shut it down. Because what the game is, you label it, and that scares people. Transphobe. And by the way, there's a lot in here where she is not in any way, shape, or form endorsing what in many states, the trend that we just talked about from the Wall Street Journal story, right, about Republican-controlled states are doing. And I can't even imagine what this must be like for parents. We have talked about that before, to be in the middle of wanting to do the right thing by your child, by trying to understand what's at work here, how complicated this sort of thing is. So to be caught in the middle of, I got to worry about what? I got to worry about laws where I might be prosecuted? What are we doing? That's not the answer, as far as I'm concerned. But an honest discussion, more honest discussions about it that include potentially paying attention to individuals like Helen Lewis and others who've, like I said, written about this, trying to, I think, quite frankly, correct the record that previously was trying to tell us there is nothing to see here other than transphobes who seem terrified. And I'll say again, they're out there. I don't know why they're out there. I don't know why you'd give a bleep about other people, especially other adults. But I do think there is a dividing line for most reasonable people between what an adult's going to do, regardless of whatever evidence is there or approach, and what children at younger and younger ages are indeed doing, and how quickly they are doing it. And if her information is accurate, there are a number of countries, doctors, professionals, who don't say they have the last word on it, but are saying, we're going way too fast here. And we got to stop turning this into a partisan issue. We have to stop worrying about who we're giving sustenance to. We have to do what we should do, which is protect children in all forms before we continue to go down this particular road, or we act as certain as apparently some medical establishments seem to be, when, let's be honest about it, it's in their interests, not to mention their financial interests, to continue to go down that particular road. It's ironic because big medicine, big pharma, we often, historically, we're supposed to be suspicious of big pharma. Except if we do it in a specific case, it's going to give a little bit of juice to the enemy, then we've got to trust them entirely. All those questions should be, I think, absolutely fair game. And as I said, this story was in the May 4th. Well, I don't know if this was in the magazine or not, but it was online as of the date of it was, if you're interested, in May 4th, 2023. I don't know if you need a subscription for this story or not.
You don't.
Helen Lewis wrote it, and I think it's worthy of a little bit of time and attention. Anything else you want to add to this? I mean, it's again, neither one of us are doctors. We're not medical. I'm just here trying to read and trying to learn and scratching my head.
I think that's what a lot of people.
We got to stop being terrified of talking about it. We have to. It's ridiculous to be afraid of raising questions and having conversations in fear for getting obliterated online. It's just stupid. We get nowhere.
And that's where a lot of it is, right?
Yes.
That's where a lot of the discussions are had now, sadly, online. And then those things get picked up, and then it's just this groundswell. And we've talked about a lot of different issues over the years, and it's because so much stuff has changed, a lot of it for the good. But
yeah, absolutely.
The speed by which things go now, and if it's not fast enough, or if it's not, well, no, you got to decide right now. You got to tell us what side you're on right now of this thing, because we're keeping score right now at this moment. Even though we just started really diving into this thing 5 minutes ago, we're going to need everybody's opinion on this thing as it quickly goes. I think, like you say, most people on a million different issues say, well, can I learn about it first? Can I figure out what city I'm in first? Can we have some type of discussion on this stuff?
Can I have honest reporting on it? Can I have individuals who are saying, well, this isn't as black and white as people have tried to suggest? I want to learn, but I want to learn where I don't feel like it's a rigged subject from the beginning, because decisions have made to say, well, this is it. It ends up being a strategy. And by the way, it's a bad strategy because it creates suspicion. It creates the notion that, well, you don't even want to listen to evidence. You don't even listen to the possibility that there might be more to the story. Let's return to the safety of the toy department. I'll save some texts. A number of them have come in on the subject for a little later.
We'll review and preview the Twins. We'll review a piece of audio from LeBron that has people talking today. And the University of Minnesota is already looking for a new president. Will they soon be looking for a new